Welcome, everyone, to the first revisited World of Warships review. To get you up to speed if you haven't seen my World of Tanks review, which you should, here's the lowdown of how it's going to work. I break down the ship, then grade it in the following categories to determine how she fits in, and give you some recommended builds depending on playstyle. With that said, let's go over the Lucky E, the Grey Ghost, the most revered and decorated ship of the Second World War, the USS Enterprise. Now, many of you will probably know the ship from Star Trek, and, well, it's mostly down to her service history. 20 battle stars is the largest of all the World War II era ships, and was present in almost every major battle in the Pacific Campaign. I won't go too much into the history since there are plenty of good documentaries to go watch, one of which was done by a man who served on the ship and named his company after it. Considering her excellent service record and, well, sometimes insane performance from her crew, you'd figure she would stand out as a ship that can rival the current top-of-the-pack Shokaku. And to that end, it depends. Well, let's break it down. Starting off, she has 51,400 HP, which is what you should keep in mind. It's a decent chunk of HP, but oftentimes you won't be getting hit unless something went horribly wrong. And in those situations, you're usually dead anyway, cause she has paper-thin armor. Most ships will lay their HE pen or AP pen the Citadel, so saying anything beyond the HP value is just downright silly. However, something that does matter is the fact that she has 30% torpedo belt after the upgrades, which makes it possible to survive an attempt to snipe, especially since she carries the defensive fire consumable. Overall, much like with most CDs past tier 8, you can survive trying to be sniped at, but most of the time the HP is never going to be used. Now, the main part of any CV is her complement of planes, so let's go in order. First, her fighters, which are the standard F6F Hellcats. But for a tier 8 match, this plane is both slow and lacking in durability. To compensate for this, she carries a whopping 43 of them, making up almost half of her 96 plane capacity. While this seems good at first, it becomes more of a problem when you realize that you have very little as far as reserve planes for strikes, which isn't good if the game stretches to later phases. To make this situation worse, if you can manage your strafes well, you will rarely run out of planes, since most of them will either lose one squadron for a good strafe or a way to disengage from an unfavorable dogfight. In grind games, I found myself still with reserves in the hangar for planes, but the enemy has no more aircraft at all because many of the well-placed bait and strafes, which can lead to air supremacy without too much difficulty. In the hands of the right player, these planes can be deadly even to higher tier CVs because of the sheer number of them, and the ability to strafe ruins most planes regardless of tier if done correctly. Just keep in mind her base number of planes is 5 for all squadrons, since she has to have a few gimmicks because premium. Now, the torpedo bombers are kind of funky. 5 planes at first would seem like a downgrade until you remember that the IJN has been using 4 for quite some time. These are the TBF dive bombers, which are exactly the same ones you would see on the Ranger 1 tier below. And while the lack of one bomber is at first tolerable, it quickly becomes daunting when you see the drop pattern. Much like the Kaga, she has a unique drop pattern, but unlike the Kaga, this one is best described as tedious to use. The large gaps make it possible for ships with good rudder shift to dodge most, if not all of the drop in a good turn. However, ships with poor turning, even small DDs, can get caught out by the drop if they overturn, and to counteract this you get 2 squadrons, meaning that unlike the Ranger or the Lexington, you can cross-drop in a manner similar to Shokaku. With a max damage of almost 10k per torpedo, you can make most ships hurt a lot with only a few hits, provided their torpedo protection is not significant in any way. However, much like most of the planes on this CV, any form of up-tiering will hurt you a lot since you only get 3 full squadrons in reserve, and most of them can get shot down rather quickly by tier 9/10 level AA. It's not the best, but you can make it work since you get double the squadrons. And lastly, her dive bombers. The thing she is most noted for in ships because her Douglas SBDs get access to 2 kinds of ammunition. First are the standard 500-pound HE bombs, which are the same on the Ranger. I'm starting to notice a pattern here. Anyway, the second option is half-ton AP bombs, and this is the reason why you play the Enterprise. The HE bombs just give her typical CV gameplay, but the AP bombs change how you pick your targets. On the one hand, these bombs seem impressive, AK damage a bomb, and when you slap it on something vulnerable for the first time, you're just However, the main problem is that you need to know what the target's armor scheme and deck armor is. German battleships tend to take massive damage from this, but it's not just restricted to them. French cruisers, some IJN battleships, some Royal Navy cruisers, the Moskva, and the Big 7 suffer massive damage from this. On the other hand though, targets that don't have vulnerable deck armor, you roll just about as much as an HE bomb salvo, but don't have the benefit of damage over time because you can't start fires. A lot about using these AP bombs is down to player knowledge and experimentation, meaning you won't know what you can devastating strike until you try it. One side note about the AP dive bombers is that they don't give a shit about fighters or defensive fire. And I'm not kidding about that. If they have it up, just finish the drop quickly or get out of range because you will get shredded anyway, but the drop doesn't differ much in accuracy, so there's that. Also, the armor-piercing bombs have had their drop altered to more represent the battleships that she's supposed to be hitting with them, so it's next to impossible to miss unless you somehow fuck up the drop. Especially considering the auto-drop is really easy to land. Like, why do this for gaming? Why make it so easy to auto-drop? Why should it be possible for a CV to just, oh hey Hosho? Overall, her strike package can hit hard, but requires skill in manual drops and target acquisition to pull off effectively, especially when you get up-tiered. You can potentially have air superiority, which will allow for an easier time in striking, but a lot of it comes down to playing around your down-tiered planes. Also, fuck this thing. This thing in particular, since it doesn't matter what build she has. The 76mm are too strong for your planes. Now, since she has secondaries, I'm obligated to tell you about them, and that they exist. That's it, moving on, since they're shit, and if you're using secondaries on the CV, something has gone horribly wrong. The AA defense, however, is at least worth mentioning in the fact that you can get sniped. It's just not going to happen since defensive fire usually dissuades most players from attacking a CV while it's up. And while it's not great since you won't be putting many upgrades into it, it's enough to get the job done. The main problem with it though is that it's concentrated around the 20mm Orikins, which have very short range. And since you won't be dumping any skills or equipment into it, it's only going to be as good as the base stats. Guess it's to be expected since she did take a few hits in the war, but hey, people like scars on the badass, it's not a big deal. Next is mobility, and the thing about CVs is that they can't turn for shit. Battleship hull, and while it doesn't have the inertia of a battleship, it still has the turning circle of one. 1,070-meter turning circle means that, well, you are never going to torpedo beat unless the one who dropped it is a complete dolt. Your rudder shift is okay, but the main thing is the forward speed since it's how you stay alive. 32.5 base knot speed is nice, but it's about average for most aircraft carriers, so it's nothing impressive. It'll get the job done, but you still want to try to pay attention a little. And lastly, concealment, aka how you avoid getting shot at in the first place. Base range of 14.6 kilometers along with 13.8 air detectability means that she can get stealthy enough, though keep in mind that it requires both Concealment Expert and the Concealment Module to make it work. While it's not as stealthy as Shokaku, it could be worse since Lexington has battleship levels of detectability. I mean, you're not a ninja, but at the same time, you're also not Rambo, just making yourself known to the enemies. More just the guy in between. So, let's grade them up and rate her down. Survivability. Good chunk of HP but weak armor means that HE and AP will ruin your day, and the torpedo belt protection is only good for making up for mistakes in getting sniped. Air superiority. Two fighters which, while slower in skilled hands, can clear the skies by sheer volume of them. It's not midway levels of air control, but for the tier 8, the only real threat is an air superiority Lexington, and even then, it's a skill-based matchup. Striking power. has massive potential damage, especially with the armor-piercing bombs, but the torpedoes are inconsistent to an active evading target, and the armor-piercing bombs only hurt ships without good multi-layer deck armor, or ones that it doesn't just straight up over-penetrate. Secondary armament. No. Just no. AA defense. Decent range, but the damage being so close range orientated lets her down here. Defensive fire doesn't really help since the 127s aren't enough to shred planes on their own. Maneuverability. Average top speed and good acceleration lets her get to safety in reasonable time, but the bad turning circle means preemptive movement is the more important reaction to have than, well, reacting. Concealment. It's standard cruiser level, it's not fantastic, but it gets the job done. So, for a standard build you take the following skills and equipment. Though you can swap aircraft servicing for better fighter ammunition and durability if you wish, but if you know how to strafe properly, you can just wreck most planes without it. Granted, the extra ammunition is nice to have. Prioritize air supremacy over concealment experts since the decrease isn't as big and you need the extra bomber/fighter to make it easier on yourself. For flags that are useful, take anything that increases fire chance and plane chance, and the rest can be used for credits or the XP for the captain. Alternatively, you can increase your fighter's power with set of 7, but either than that, there's not much to that. She's just like all other CVs, you rely on planes so most combat-focused flags are useless. Honestly, I don't know what to think of her. On the one hand, I enjoy her high skill ceiling and high learning curve, which means that someone needs to invest time in order to make her as scary as her real-world counterpart, but on the other hand, having her only be able to be good in the top percentage of players who won't play her because there's better options seems like a waste. Considering the ship's history, it's a shame to see her in the game the way she is, because she was the first of the USN to be a Knight-specific carrier, as well as the only US ship to be rewarded with an honor from the Royal Navy. I always was fond of the idea of for skilled players ships that have high-risk, high-reward playstyles, but for the Grey Ghost, it just comes off as high-risk, low-reward due to her down-tiered planes. Ah, well, it's still better than... I'm not saying the name. Thank you, Captains, for staying with me through this revised ship review. If you want to see more, feel free to hit the subscribe button, and if you want to suggest the next ship, just leave a comment below. That's all I have essentially for you, so until next time, have a good one.